We've all heard about that 4% rule, right? How much can you safely withdraw while in retirement but never run out of money? But is that holding you back? Could you actually triple your retirement income overnight? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hello, my fellow Ripplers. This is Chris Miles, your cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. This show is for you if you want your money working harder for you, so you don't have to work so freaking hard for that money. And also, if you want to become work optional, where you have enough passive income coming in to cover all of your family's needs and be able to work because you want to, not because you have to. But you're not just doing this to get rich, although it's great to be able to do what you love with those you love. But more importantly, you're here to create an impact, and you want to become a rippler by creating a ripple effect through the lives of others, because as you're blessed financially, you can bless more people's lives. That's why I'm here today. Thank you for tuning in, for sharing and binging on these episodes. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to go check our website, moneyripples.com. We got plenty of great stuff in there, including even things about max ROI infinite banking, even an actual work optional calculator that you can actually try out today. So be sure to go visit us now. All right, so let's talk about this. We've mentioned the 4% rule before, and we've debunked that myth, right? What's so fascinating, by the way, I just saw an article recently, the guy that created, which was never intended to be a rule. Now, if you don't know what the 4% rule is, it's they figured out based on these simulations of the market over so many years. And by the way, it's from 1926 to 1976. So those years, that 50-year period, how much could you safely withdraw no matter what is going on in the market? They guessed 4%. Now, what's so funny is that, of course, that was 1976. Now, this guy created it in the 90s. He was using it as just a rule of thumb for him and his own clients, but it caught on because it was simple, right? And people like simple, and I'm cool with that. The only problem is this, is that people are now living longer and inflation is now higher. And as a result, if you're trying to retire in your 60s, it's a 3% rule. And so many companies have done this and gone through it saying, no, it's 3%. Now they'll say 4% if you're over the age of 70, right? Because you got less time that you have to live on. But 3% is more what it's been lately. What's so fascinating, I found an article. The guy actually, he's coming out with a brand new book saying how it can actually be over 5%. I think it's like 5.4% or something like that. So he actually increased the number if you follow his investing methodology he uses with his clients. I mean, come on. I don't know if you guys, I know you guys are pretty smart. You're kind of seeing the writing on the wall with this. I mean, obviously the guy's writing a book. He's trying to get more clients. He's saying, oh, it can actually be 5% if you do my kind of portfolio diversification in international stocks, which I'm like, international stocks would be the worst thing to go in right now. And this and this and this. So he's calling all these things. I'm like, okay, your clients are going to lose lots of money. Good luck on that 5% rule. And so anyways, I've talked about this 4% rule many times and how it's so dumb. Now, like I said, you can go off the 3% rule. That's fine, especially if you're trying to retire at normal retirement age. If you're trying to retire young, 2%. Now, here's the thing, is I've had several people lately say, okay, Chris, what makes yours different than if I just went and invested in the stock market? Because Chris, couldn't I make 10.4% average in the S&P 500? I mean, that's what it's been forever, right? Which I always laugh at those numbers because it has been that number forever, but nobody really questions it. I did have somebody saying that. And again, these are from good places. These people asking questions, they're trying to get clarity. And so I want to address this specifically because actually believing in the S&P 500 and believing in all these things. That's why I already spent months on these myths that we talked about over the last several weeks. The reason we are addressing this is because you realize that the numbers have been overinflated, that the S&P has only averaged just about 8.5% without dividends reinvested. But here's the problem. Most of the S&P that actually influences the S&P 500, most of the weighted stocks in there are not dividend paying stocks. They're now just like the newer tech stocks, things like that. The Coca-Colas and the GMs are now a thing of the past. Yes, they might still be in the S&P 500, but they're a very tiny amount. And so you're starting to see more and more that the thing that made the S&P pay more than what it actually has done has been all these dividends that are no longer a big part of that S&P 500. So that's why I told them, it's like, listen, even if we say it's 1% more with these dividends, that's still 9.5%. And that's still one of the highest returns we've seen in the last 20 years for a 30-year average. That should concern you, right? But even if, let's just go with the argument for argument's sake, let's just say you do happen to get 10% in the S&P 500. Well, let's look at the other side. What if you got 10% in the kind of investments we talk about, the alternative investments, things in the main street investing, things that are tied to business, tied to real estate, tied to commodities like oil and gas and whatnot? These kind of investments can pay double-digit returns. But here's the big difference. You have the accumulation theory going on with people putting money in mutual funds or into S&P 500 indexes, right? And then you've got the velocity theory that's going on here, or a strategy or method. Accumulation method versus velocity, two very different. One is very much growing the money. One's very much the income of the money. Ultimately, if you want financial freedom, which one's going to give you the better freedom? Is it just a big dollar amount? Or is it the income that you get from your dollars? What's more important? And follow up on that question, would you rather have a big pool of money that pays you a little bit of money, or a smaller pool of money that pays you just as much as the big pool of money? Obviously, the answer is pretty simple, right? We want to get as much leverage as possible. We want the income. And I've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Really, it's been into the thousands, but I'm trying to underestimate here. But I have talked to hundreds and hundreds of people, families, and dug into their finances and what they really want. And I know a lot of you, I've talked to a lot of you listeners, and even many of you that become our clients too. And the biggest thing that you ultimately want is the income. You want the income always coming in. Sure, it's great to have a big storage of cash, but at the end of the day, who cares about this big store of cash if it doesn't produce income? This is why I've had so many clients come in that have had say, I've got $2 million literally in IRAs, 401ks, which puts them in the top 1% of all savers in the country. And yet they'll say, but I make zero income from it. I have to keep working because I don't know when to stop. I don't know how to stop because I'm trying to get to this point of 3%, right? But again, if you have $2 million, 3%, what are you living on? $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month. And in most cases, you're putting into these tax deferred 401ks and IRAs. So what do you got to do also? Pay taxes. So you're like, yeah, I got 5,000 a month. Oh, I'm hoping I get to keep about 3,500 to 4,000 a month. Can you really live off that well? This is why people want Social Security, right? This is why they want this stuff. This is the problem we're running into. And so even if you happen to be the top 1% of people that might have multiple millions of dollars saved up in these accounts, these retirement accounts, you're realizing you might barely eke out a middle-class lifestyle. Is that what you've always dreamed of? Did you dream of saving millions of dollars to then live on just a few thousand a month? A few 10,000s a year, not even in the hundreds of thousands a year, like $5,000 a month or less after taxes. That is the big discrepancy. And that's where we come to real life. This is what happened to my dad. This is what happened to so many people, even people that come to us that are actually losing hope. But there is an answer. How do you triple your retirement income overnight? It's focusing on passive income cash flow. Here's how. Remember, if we're only living on 3%, you got that, say that $2 million person, right? 3%, you're now living on $60,000 a year. But if you could put it into an investment that's paying you income of 10% a year, not touching your principal, because the reason they do that in the stock market is because it can go up and down. And so you can ride those waves. You have to take out less than the interest, especially with inflation and everything else. What if I can take out 10%? What if I'm making at least 10% on my investments? Well, 10% of that 2 million is now 200,000 a year, not 60,000, 200,000 a year. Big, big difference. That's more than triple of that 3%. Heck, even if you had a 4% rule, well, guess what? There are some investments that will pay you like 1% a month or 12% a year. They're becoming less common now, but they're still out there. Some pay more, some pay a little less, but still 12%, you make 1% a month, that's still triple your 4% rule you're hoping to live on. You can literally do it overnight. And this is what I see happen all the time. I've mentioned Dan Markert. He's been on our podcast a couple of times. I brought up him. He came to us because he said, hey, I have $1 million in my retirement account. The financial advisor says I can live on 3%, but that's only $30,000 a year. I had to have answers. So he started looking around, found me on another podcast, then started following our show, the Money Ripples podcast, and then he hired us to become one of our consulting clients, right? And he said the same thing. He's like, I can't live on $30,000 a year. What do I do? And next thing you know, we're getting him in diversified in different types of alternative investments, everything from, he had a couple of duplexes because they were paying pretty good cash flow several years back. He also got into some oil and gas investments that were paying pretty well. He also got into some multifamily, like apartments and whatnot. And the next thing you know, his million is now kicking off 130,000 a year, not 30,000 a year. And actually, I know that in the podcast interview, he said 13,000 a month. I know that was more. But I also knew it fluctuated depending on oil prices. So I always bring that number down just to, again, under promise, because I know that he wasn't always hitting 13,000 a month. If you've been following this podcast, you're probably looking for great ways to create passive income right now, right? Well, we got you covered here with Central Lending. Central Lending specializes in alternative investments that actually are designed to create steady returns and long-term financial security for you and your family. Now, they prioritize transparency. They love, building those strong relationships, giving you that confidence and peace of mind, knowing that you have your money working harder for you, so you don't have to work so hard for that money. You want to learn more how to do that? Go to centrallending.com and check out what they've got today to create your passive income and wealth creation right now. But that's the difference, guys. Literally, same money, more effective, right? Just like I've had clients that had $250,000, live on 3% of a quarter million, 7,500 a year, nothing, right? Nothing to live on. And of course, a lot of people I see with $250,000 might be like in their 40s. Well, that's 2% you can live on. That's 9,000 a year. You're like maybe live on 10 grand a year versus what if I can get that 250,000 to make me 25,000 a year, not 10 grand, but 25,000 a year, not 7,500, 25,000 a year, right? That's the difference. That's a massive difference right there. So actually I said 10,000 a year. That's not even right. It was 5,000 a year. I went the opposite direction. 2% would be 5,000 a year on 250,000. 25,000 is definitely better than 5,000. Would you agree? So if you're trying to retire early, this is even more impactful because you're not worried about your money running out as quickly. You can now do this. Now, what I see is a lot of people will get to that freedom number, right? They'll get to that point where they now have as much passive income as 100% of their family's expenses. But then you don't want to just surviving. So many of them will keep going to not just a financial independence number, but then they go for a freedom number that might be like at least 50% higher. So say that somebody's spending 10,000 a month, they may want to get to 15,000 a month before they finally say, okay, I'm not just work optional like it was when I was financially independent. Now I'm free. Now I can literally quit my job and I'm fine. Like what I see is most people don't want to quit their jobs. They want to keep going. That's the difference. It's just money. And this is what blew my mind. This is why I left being a financial advisor. I mean, among the other lies and myths that I got was when I realized like, wait a minute, I'm doing the math here. There's hope again. There's actually hope for people. It's just like I had a woman, again, she only had $250,000, right? It wasn't like she had a ton of money. She had $250,000. And she was just telling me, she's like, Chris, if I could just have $2,000 a month, I can be a health coach. She was, by the way, she was about 50 years old. She's like, I just want to be a health coach in the morning for a few hours. I want to work out, be a health coach, and then have the rest of my day free. And she's like, I only need $2,000 a month to do that. And I said, well, guess what? You have a $250,000 making 10% a year. That is now $25,000 a year or just over $2,000 a month. Ta-da, you did it. Congratulations. And she was like, it was so mind-boggling to her that it was even that possible because she had just met with a financial planner who told her, you know what, you're probably going to need to get up to $1 million. You need to quadruple your money so you can actually live on that. And then I had to tell her, no, you don't. You don't have to triple, quadruple your money. You could do it right now. She had a 10-year retirement goal. I told her, listen, because of the situation you're in, you could literally do it this next year. You don't have to wait 10 years. You can literally do it next year. And she was be thrilled if she could do it in 10 years because she didn't think she could, with $250,000, get it up closer to $1 million in just 10 years. Even if she was saving and hoping and praying the market would do just right. That's the difference. Imagine this. Imagine if she, by the way, she actually decided to keep continuing down that path because she talked to her girlfriends. And her girlfriends said, no. Just stay on the path. Keep saving in the stock market. Don't do this stuff. Even though literally tens of millions of us have proven it correctly, she was like, I'm going to go back to what's comfortable. So she shrunk back to that safe little place. Here's the thing. I think it was about 5 years ago when I talked to her, I think it was about 2020. The last 5 years, yes, the market has gone up. Yeah, we've seen the stock market actually increase since then, haven't we? Not quite 100%, but it's done decently well. So maybe let's just say for argument's sake, maybe she got to $500,000 so far. She's not to that $1 million goal that her financial advisor wants her to get to. She's still hoping to go. She's still hoping the market keeps going up. But what if the market tanks another 50%? What if she goes back down to that $250,000, just like she was around 2020? And then she has to wait for the slow climb up because market, when it drops fast and it drops hard, usually within a year or so. and then all those losses are gone. Sometimes it can take a couple years, but most people never react quickly enough to get out or get out even before it drops. They stay in. So what if all of a sudden that happens and then she's got to wait another additional 10 years to finally get back up to that 500,000? Maybe she gets up to 750,000, but thanks to inflation, she's got to live on more. And so now she's got to get to like 1.25 or 1.5 million by that point. And now she's working well into her 60s when she could have done it from day one, but she didn't do it. Versus I've had plenty of other clients do the same thing. Actually people just around that same period of time that got in with similar amounts of money. Maybe they had several hundred thousand to work with, but now they're like making over 10,000 a month of passive income, right? Some are like around 5,000, some are more. Think about it. That's different. That's real cash in their pocket today versus hoping and praying you can accumulate just right. And then bam, market takes it all away from you. And then you're waiting another decade plus to get back to where you were. Don't be the person that was in 2000 saying, should I take my money out? And then the market tanks. And you're like, well, now it's going down. I don't want to lose money. So I'm going to stay in it again. And then you ride it back up. And then of course, bam, 2007 hits and you lose money again. And then it goes back up. And finally by 2015, you're back to where you were. But inflation is now double. You have to wait till 2020 before you finally say, now I finally got my money back after inflation. Do you want to be that person to wait 20 years? Wrong time. Wrong way to do it. There's so much. The longer their time horizon becomes, the more risk, the more things that can go wrong. The shorter you can shorten this time frame, the less you worry about inflation, the less you worry about, markets going up or down, left or right. Because if you can get that cash to work now versus estimating in a calculator, hopefully someday it'll get there, you're going to lose. There's going to be a point where you're going to get discouraged and it's going to extend the timeline, which is why so few people follow the traditional way, going for that 3% or 4% rule, whatever they're trying to go for, and they're working into their 60s and 70s before they finally say, now I have to quit. Don't be that casualty. Don't be another statistic, another number of the tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of retirees that end up in this place where they're banking, literally need Social Security just to survive, especially when inflation is killing them more than Social Security is giving them a raise. This is where that comes into play. This is why you should focus on acceleration of your money, not the accumulation of it. Velocitize it. And the way to do that is through income producing assets. Predictable passive income. That is the key to security and financial freedom, not riding waves in the markets, hoping and praying it's going to work out. And if you've already been riding the 16-year wave up, guess where the next wave is going to be? You've got it. If you want to change your life, if you don't want to be caught and be another statistic that ends up being those people that ends up in the media saying retirees are retiring broke, if you don't want to be that person, do something different. I don't care if you even just sit on cash, right? Do something different. Do something that actually works and then get that money working harder for you. That is the key. If we can be of any service to you, you can always book a time to talk to one of us at moneyripples.com. In the meantime, don't just sit and wait. Take action to get results now. That is my challenge to you. Make it a wonderful and prosperous week.